with and without volatility, the thing is why this consumer would switch from chocolate to another thing is because they don't care. It's a consumer. That type of consumer is not bringing a solid future for cacao producers. That type of consumer is consuming something because they need something sweet, because
Right. It's the
because
sugar, right?
it's the sugar, but it also at this point is also a generational thing. It's like your grandmother used to eat that type of chocolate, so I'm giving this to my kids. It's deeper
Mm.
than just sugar.
If you're starting or growing your business in these volatile times in coffee and you need a little extra support, our scope of business advisory services may be just what you need. Join one of our hugely successful mastermind groups for support in a group setting, or send us an email to discuss our one-on-one consulting and business advisory services, where we'll work with you one-on-one to solve specific problems in your coffee business. All our services come with a 100% money-back guarantee, so send us an email at support@mapperforward.org and let us know how we can help you today. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is unfortunately the final episode of what has been a really great conversation, Cesar, on cacao and all of the Mr. Beast side of cacao and the fair trade side of cacao, the Belco side of cacao ceremonies, blah, blah, blah. We've talked about everything about cacao in the industry. But the one thing we haven't talked about very much is the consumer. So we, in this episode, are going to talk about who the consumers of cacao are and what the future of cacao is. And what we didn't say is, we haven't talked about, there is a distinct difference between cacao and chocolate. And we really haven't talked about the difference between those two things.
Yeah.
Have we?
No, I don't think so. I think
So maybe that's what
we assume everybody knows cacao and
right.
chocolate and maybe.
But when you entered the last series on this conversation about, the last episode on this conversation about ceremonial cacao, it's a very interesting kind of discussion when we talk about cacao in a Kit Kat versus cacao in ceremonial cacao, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe we can help people understand what the difference between chocolate is and ceremonial cacao.
Yeah, I mean, what I know, and this, I would say, there is a very interesting book, Substance and Seduction, Catherine Sampeck. She resumed with another, she's an editor, and there is another editor, I don't remember her name. They resume a little bit of the history of where the word chocolate comes from. The word chocolate comes from what at the time was the south of Guatemala, in the area of what today is Los Hidalgos in El Salvador. And as far as I understand her document, all the information that we have says the word chocolate comes from there.
Okay.
And this is, now we are not talking about the Spanish, we are talking about the language that it was using there by the Pipiles, who was the group of people living there. And chocolate literally means bitter drink. First of all, it's a drink. And second, it's bitter. However, there is from Peru to Bolivia, Brazil to south of Mexico, the way that the word chocolate was moving all around, because the cacao comes from the south, but the word chocolate comes from the center of America. So both move, right? The cacao moves before, of course. And then the chocolate is this drink that it can be something that normally has chocolate, meaning cacao there. But it can have corn, it can have spices, it can have different honey, can have different things. It's a drink. So that's the base of the word that the Spanish, who moved the cacao to the islands and then move it to Europe, bring also with the cacao. They bring the word chocolate. So the cacao it's the base to use to make chocolate. And chocolate becomes a drink, but also becomes chocolate as we know it right now. And the most popular version of the chocolate I will say, if you ask like people what is chocolate, they will say a chocolate bar, right?
Mm,
But chocolate, it's not necessarily a bar. It can be so many versions of that.
mm.
So, but why we are talking about this? Uh,
Because we want to, like, right now, with all of this volatility that's happening in the market, right? We look at a Kit Kat and people talk about this is chocolate. A Kit Kat is chocolate. Or a chocolate bar that you buy, a Mars bar, all of these
yeah,
things, this is chocolate,
what
right?
chocolate?
But this is mostly sugar. This is the consumer the consumer of chocolate is not really consuming cacao. There's
Mm.
cacao in that, but what they're really consuming is a whole bunch of sugar with some milk powder, a little bit of cacao, more cacao butter than cacao,
Yeah, I mean, this applies to other products.
right?
However, the way that we use cacao, understanding that cacao is the tree, cacao is the tree who grows, cacao is the tree who gives
Mm,
cacao pods that you open,
right,
fermented or not. The bean, the dry bean, is the base to make chocolate. That
right. Eh,
so you have cacao that in big regions normally connected with the British colonialism. People say cocoa, for example,
right.
and but cacao, cocoa for many years I couldn't get it. I was researching everywhere, I couldn't get it. It's the same basically. So
Hmm.
before was this concept like cocoa is the result of when you press the chocolate bean and you put out the
Right.
butter and the powder is the cocoa.
Mm,
Okay, we are calling it cocoa, but you can be in Uganda, for example. In Uganda, 100% of the people describe cacao as cocoa, you know.
okay.
But if you come back a little bit in the books, we'll see that the way that they pronounce the cacao beans is something like cacao, for example. So, like cacao, cocoa, we are talking about the beans. This is what is interesting right
Right.
now. So the difference between cacao and chocolate, coming back to the topic, is like cacao is the bean,
Hmm.
and cocoa it could be the bean, and or it can be the powder, but
Right.
chocolate is the product that we
Of
make
that.
today, in
Mm.
which the base is cacao.
Hmm. And if we look at the consumers of cacao and chocolate and all of its derivatives, right? As the volatility of price moves, do you think that we see the consumer shift? Because when we talk about this, we're not just talking about consumers that are ingesting it.
Mhm.
We're also talking about people who are using it in cosmetics. We're
Yeah,
talking about people like these are the consumers,
yeah.
you know, of this cacao and its derivatives. Do we expect in your mind, and I'm aware that this you're not a market expert on this kind of thing, but you
Mhm.
are involved in the trade of this, right?
Yeah.
So do you expect this to shift as the volatility continues?
Not all, I mean, with and without volatility, the thing is why this consumer would switch from chocolate to another thing is because they don't care. It's a consumer. That type of consumer is not bringing a solid future for cacao producers. That type of consumer is consuming something because they need something sweet, because
Right. It's the
because
sugar, right?
it's the sugar, but it also at this point is also a generational thing. It's like your grandmother used to eat that type of chocolate, so I'm giving this to my kids. It's deeper
Mm.
than just sugar. It's something that is just a habit. Like, and then the religion. And I know that in Turkey, for example, is a
Hmm.
country that I know a little bit. That during Ramadan, the
Hmm.
consume of chocolate is
Hmm.
very important. So, hey, that's the point when high season is there. In France, a country with a very high culture of food,
Hmm.
right now, like the Eastern, it's incredible. The peak,
Yeah.
you talk to chocolate makers and those guys, those girls are tired of making chocolate,
Yeah.
and they were getting ready like 4 months ago for this moment. So they depend of the thing. So are the consumers moving? I think yes, they are moving because they are innocent in a way, or ignorant, if you. And if and it's very interesting. The other day, I talked to a chocolate maker, a client of us, and he's
Uh,
like super nice guy, and he's like, I decide to absorb the price of the cacao, and I'm not putting up the prices. But the crazy thing, he says, uh, my clients, some of them, they are saying that they are buying less chocolate right now because the prices, but he didn't change the prices. So
wow, so interesting,
that's
right?
what I'm saying. The consumer, a lot of sorry consumers, but I am a consumer too. We are ignorant and we are victims, if you want,
Yeah.
also of this machine of volatility. If you want that, even if it doesn't impact, it's just the perception of the thing. It's like, I think it's expensive now. So, and
I I heard this really, really interesting thing today that I didn't think it was going to be relevant in this conversation, but it clearly is. Have you heard of these drugs like Ozempic and I don't know the names of them, but they're these drugs that a lot of people are taking, particularly in America,
yeah,
so that the GLP ones, right? You've
yeah.
heard of these? Right.
And basically you become a zombie.
I
It,
love the way that you use it in English language. It's so fun.
No,
But
it's the way that the parents tell the kids right now. If you use that drug, you're gonna become a zombie. It's not like smoking
right.
weed, for example. Like then you're gonna become lazy if you want. And there is all this.
Some people, some
No,
people. I'm
no.
not
I'm talking
lazy.
about the. I'm
I
talking
smoke
about
weed.
the theory. Like.
Right, right.
But,
So it's the perception of it, right? So
Mhm.
it turns out that Khloe Kardashian has partnered with Chobani. You know the big
No,
yogurt maker Chobani? Chobani is this huge,
uh,
huge.
sorry, my
Um,
ignorance. I need to. I'm gonna
um,
research.
it's this huge yogurt manufacturer in the United States, and they partnered with Khloe Kardashian because she's a big advocate of
Yeah,
Ozempic and
yeah,
these GLP ones, right? As everyone would expect. And the reason that they are doing this is quite strategic. It turns out that the consuming habits of all of these people, and it's a lot of people that are on these GLP 1s, is shifting the market when it comes to the consumption of confectionery foods, like a lot of the chocolates that are on the market.
hmm
And the shift is going from all of these chocolates and candies towards high protein
yeah,
foods.
yeah,
And they're finding that this is going to impact the future of the way that candy is consumed. And all foods are consumed
yeah.
in America and around the world,
Because
which
it's
is really relevant to what we're talking about, right? Like
very. Yeah,
it's and really fascinating
yeah.
that we are in a moment where there's so much volatility and we're worried about the supply and we're worried about the sustainability, while the Kardashians are actually creating a whole other trend
Yeah.
based on what the public health, the direction of public health is going to go, because it's naturally swinging
hmm
away from the Kit Kats and the Mars bars and these kinds of things. Fascinating, no?
Fascinating. Fascinating, but this is not cacao people. This is not chocolate people. This is
Right,
product people. And the
right.
way that people will adapt in the future is, yeah, right now you open your telephone and they are talking about chocolate makers using less chocolate,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
using less cacao. So just to connect these two things, of
Yeah.
course they're gonna do it, but the people consuming this thing, they may not be concerned of the thing. They
They don't know.
they, they move with the
They have no
situation.
idea what's going on in
Yeah,
the market. They're
yeah,
just
exactly.
sheeple. No
Yeah.
disrespect intended, but they're doing what they're being marketed
Mhm.
to do. So they
Yeah.
take the Ozempic, they take the Monjaro or whatever it's called, and now they think that they're healthy. So now they don't need candy anymore and they don't need chocolates anymore. Now they're going to have high protein everything,
Yeah.
which is going to be really interesting
Yeah.
for what what is happening with cacao and all that kind of stuff. I never, like in a million years, when I was thinking about our series and our conversation, I could not have imagined that the Kardashians would have come up.
Yeah, I mean that they will exist. It's
Okay.
incredible. But I put it in the other, and this is something that I believe. And believe is a dangerous word. I
It is.
believe that cacao has a very solid future. And what I'm telling you this is because when you see human beings, we are
Mm-hmm.
sick, and we are sick because we are not eating well, you know.
Yeah.
And the medium class, is just bigger than before in the specific areas. And these
Mm-hmm.
specific areas are getting worried for what I am consuming, and this is why,
Mm-hmm.
again, certifications, they have a very important role in people is consuming fair trade or organic or etc. So cacao, the concept of high quality cacao, it has a place in the future history. And then I'm saying I believe in, but I don't have the tools right now to tell you why
Mm-hmm.
it's going to happen and how it's going to happen, but I feel it and I see it happening. So
That's the
people,
path ahead.
yeah, and people is not going to say like, okay, I stop eating chocolate. And like this cliche, if you want, consume less but consume better, it is a cliche that it becoming
That is true.
reality. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
true.
exactly. So not everybody, and I'm not saying the majority, but a lot of the people, enough
Mm-hmm.
people is waking up for this product, and if we move right, at least in a small scale, we're gonna provoke something good. So I'm charged of beliefs, but you need to believe for this. You cannot just like I, I'm not a scientific, and I'm not a mathematic person. So
Mm-hmm.
if you put the mathematic person, the scientific person, ideal case scenario, but you need something else, believers,
Right.
So with the little knowledge of mathematics, with the little knowledge of science, and with the little knowledge of beliefs, or with little amount of belief, it's a good formula that it works for me to keep doing this work, which is cacao.
Yeah.
So I absolutely believe in cacao. I know that it's an important thing to do.
And it sounds like that's the whole approach that Belco is taking towards the kind of way that you guys are looking to do business, whether it's in coffee or cacao, and the way that you're transporting everything. Um, this has been a delightful series. Thank you, Cesar. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
you coming on.
Yeah.
And thank you, Angel, for suggesting that I have Cesar on. It's been really great to have this discussion, the first of many, I hope, on this podcast. Cesar, can you tell people where they can get in contact with you and where they can read more about what you guys are doing with Cacao at Belco?
I mean, we are in different areas.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if I have to resume what we are a group of people interested in nature, interested in good cacao and good coffee.
Mm-hmm.
So we are mainly in Europe,
Mm-hmm.
and you find us when you search, it's quite easy to understand what a bean to bar means and what an artisan means. And
Mm-hmm.
lucky we are, more and more bean to bars artisans are believing in what we are doing. It's correct, and this is the way to do it. And we are making mistakes, but we are trying to do in the best version we can. So I would say, more than searching for us, search for good cacao, good chocolate, healthy products, and I'm going to make my way with my colleagues, amazing group of colleagues. And in this way, it's going to be impossible. Like if we search for this and we are trying to do this, we don't find each other. We're going to meet.
So beautifully said. We will have links in the show notes in case you want to get in contact with any of the folks from Belco. Belco.com, I think. But anyway, we'll
We
figure that out. Cesar can send me those links and we'll put
Yeah,
it in there. What were you going to say?
Belco affair, yes, of course. And like if I allow me, the only commercial that I'm doing is like we're gonna change name. the activity of cacao. And
Really?
I don't know it. At this date, I don't know the final name, but again, we are a group of people, so interesting. Let's see if it's an interesting name. We are trying to do our best.
You're welcome to come on the podcast and reveal the name to everybody here.
Yeah, that's going to
Maybe
be.
that's when Alex can come on the podcast. Let's see.
Alex, and I let you something for Alex, as I know Alex, one good thing that I can say about Alex is like he knows how to build, how to make a team. That's one of the powerful things that this guy has. And of course, there is
There's
the
more.
pilot. He's the pilot of so many things, but I
Yeah.
let you that for talk to him, and I think he must have something to say about it. I never talk about that with him, but I know that it's good on it.
Well, you can listen to him talk to me about it on the podcast.
Yeah, I
That
will.
would be great.
Absolutely.
Now, we have a tradition here. I should have told you about it off air, and I'm sorry that I didn't. But on the last episode of the series,
Yeah.
the guest says peace, love, and peanut butter. So but I
And
don't
you
think
see,
you'll get
and you have
balloons.
balloons. He's loving peanut butter, and I don't have balloons. With balloons.
Have an amazing rest of your day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Lee.
I really hope you enjoyed this episode, friends. Please don't forget to show us some love by subscribing, liking, commenting, and most of all, sharing this podcast with your friends. Check the show notes for links, including our sponsors and our Patreon. And stay tuned for more great conversations on the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward.